The silence in the crystal amphitheater stretched on for long minutes after Jake Morrison finished speaking. 47 alien species sat in complete quiet, processing what they had just heard. The translation machines hummed softly as they waited for someone to break the unusual stillness. Finally, Elder Vexthul rose from his place among the Zephyrians. His ancient stone face showed an expression that Jake had not seen before during the entire gathering. It was not condescension or amusement. It looked almost like confusion mixed with something else that was harder to identify. "Human Morrison," the elder said in his deep voice, "in my 10 million years of existence, I have heard countless stories from across the galaxy. I have witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. I have seen the birth of stars and the death of worlds, but I confess that your tales puzzle me greatly." Jake waited for the elder to continue, not sure if this was praise or criticism. "Your stories lack the scope we expect from great narratives. They cover tiny spans of time involving single individuals on one small world. They demonstrate no superior technology, no ancient wisdom, no transcendent evolution. And yet—" Elder Vexthul paused, as if struggling to find words for a concept he had never needed to express before. "And yet they create a sensation I have not experienced in millions of years. As I listened to your tale of Amy Chen, I found myself genuinely uncertain about the outcome. I did not know if she would find her brother. I did not know if her efforts would succeed. For the first time in eons, I experienced what I believe you would call suspense. A ripple of surprised sounds passed through the alien audience. The idea that Elder Vexthul, one of the galaxy's most ancient and wise beings, could be surprised by anything was almost incomprehensible to the other species. Ambassador Chronarch from the Timekeepers shimmered as it spoke. "This is most unusual. We Timekeepers can see multiple timelines simultaneously. Past, present, and future are equally visible to us. We have not experienced uncertainty about outcomes for millions of years. Yet your human stories create a sensation we had forgotten existed, the feeling of not knowing what will happen next." Node Prime from the Machine Intelligence Network processed this information with rapid electronic sounds. "Analysis indicates that human narratives contain a previously unrecognized variable. Your stories derive emotional impact, not from superior capabilities or predetermined outcomes, but from genuine uncertainty about success or failure." Jake looked around the amphitheater and saw something remarkable happening. The alien beings were no longer looking at humans with condescension or amusement. Instead, they were staring at him and Lisa with what could only be described as curiosity and interest. Sage Omnitus from the Eternal Philosophers made a sound like wind through deep caves. "In our millions of years of contemplation, we have explored every concept that can be understood through pure logic. But your stories introduce an element we had not considered: the choice to act without certainty of success. The decision to try when probability calculations indicate failure. It is most inefficient," added Node Prime, "and yet it creates narrative tension we had not encountered before." Cluster 7 from the Hive Mind Swarm shifted its multiple body parts as different sections took turns speaking. "Our perfect unity ensures that all decisions are made collectively with complete agreement. We have not experienced individual choice in millions of years. Your tales of single beings making personal decisions despite opposition from others create sensations we had forgotten existed." Lisa stepped forward, encouraged by the changing mood in the amphitheater. "That's what makes human stories special. They're not about inevitable victories or perfect solutions. They're about ordinary people who decide to keep trying even when they don't know if they'll succeed." Entity Nullsong from the Void Touched created shifting shadow patterns as it spoke. "We have survived cosmic horrors through superior evolution beyond normal existence. Your humans survive ordinary challenges through what appears to be sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. This concept is alien to us but fascinating." The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with gold and silver light. "We have witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. We understand cosmic forces that shape entire star systems. But we had forgotten what it feels like to wonder if someone will accomplish their goal. Your stories create suspense through uncertainty rather than awe through scope." Elder Vexthul spoke again, his ancient voice carrying a tone Jake had not heard before. It almost sounded like wonder. "Human Morrison, I believe your species has shared something unique with our gathering. You have reminded us of sensations we lost as we became more advanced and perfect. The feeling of not knowing the outcome, the tension of uncertain success, the emotional impact of individual choice against impossible odds." "But Elder Vexthul," Jake said carefully, Surely your own stories from millions of years of existence must contain moments of uncertainty and choice. The ancient being made a sound that the translator identified as something between laughter and sadness. That is precisely the problem, young human. In our millions of years of existence, we have become too wise to experience real uncertainty. We have seen similar situations so many times that we always know how they will end. We have eliminated surprise from our lives through perfect knowledge. Ambassador Cronarch shimmered in agreement. We timekeepers see all possible outcomes simultaneously. There is no mystery left for us. No moment when we do not know what will happen next. Our calculations eliminate uncertainty, added Node Prime. Perfect logic ensures predictable results. Our unity prevents individual choice, said Cluster 7. All decisions are made collectively with complete consensus. Lisa suddenly understood what was happening. You've all become so advanced that you've lost the ability to be surprised. Your stories are impressive, but they're predictable because you've eliminated the elements that make stories emotionally compelling. Precisely, Elder Vexthal confirmed. In becoming perfect, we have lost something we did not realize we were giving up. The possibility that things might not work out as planned. The tension of not knowing if effort will be rewarded with success. Jake felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Pride that humanity had contributed something valuable to this gathering of cosmic intelligences. Sadness that these ancient beings had traded away something precious in their quest for perfection and wisdom. So what happens now? He asked. The alien beings looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were thinking about this question seriously. Finally, Elder Vexthal spoke for the group. Now, Human Morrison, we would very much like to hear more of these stories from your young species. We had expected to teach you about narrative excellence through our ancient wisdom and cosmic scope. Instead, you have taught us about something we had lost and forgotten we missed. As the Great Story Exchange concluded, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the formal closing ceremony that had been planned, representatives from different species approached Jake and Lisa with requests. They wanted to hear more human stories. They wanted to understand how ordinary beings could create such compelling narratives through uncertainty and individual choice. Crystalline Hegemony asked about human tales of people who succeeded despite having short lifespans and limited knowledge. The Depths Dwellers wanted to learn about stories where quick decisions mattered more than careful contemplation. Even the Perfect Machine Intelligence Network requested narratives about humans who succeeded through intuition and emotion rather than logical calculation. Elder Vexthal made a final announcement to the gathering. This universal story exchange has revealed something unexpected. We came here to share our greatest tales with younger species and demonstrate our narrative superiority. Instead, the youngest species among us has shown us something we had lost in our march toward perfection. They have reminded us that the most compelling stories are not about inevitable success, but about the choice to keep trying when success is uncertain. Jake and Lisa returned to Earth carrying invitations from dozens of alien species. They had been asked to visit other worlds and share more human stories. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations, for all their wisdom and power, had discovered they were hungry for tales about ordinary people doing extraordinary things through nothing more than determination and hope. The final scene of the Great Story Exchange played out. Months later on Earth, Amy Chen, now 93 years old, sat in a Detroit nursing home teaching origami to her great-granddaughter. Her weathered hands folded paper into the shape of a crane while she told stories about her late brother Peter, who had become a beloved teacher after the war. Amy had no idea that her story had become legendary across 47 star systems. She did not know that alien beings who had witnessed the birth of galaxies gathered to hear tales about her decision to save her brother, despite impossible odds. She was simply a grandmother sharing family history with a child, still believing that small acts of love and determination could make the world a little better. The galaxy had shared their greatest stories, tales spanning eons and bending reality itself. The final day of the Great Story Exchange arrived with an atmosphere of eager anticipation, mixed with barely concealed condescension. Jake Morrison stood outside the Crystal Amphitheater, knowing that in 1 hour he would either make humanity proud or embarrass his entire species in front of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Lisa Bennett approached, him carrying their prepared presentation materials. Jake, I've been reviewing our notes about human technological achievements in space exploration. Maybe we should focus on the development of faster-than-light travel, or our rapid colonization of nearby star systems. Jake shook his head. Lisa, I've been thinking about this all night. We can't compete with stories about the birth of the universe or perfect mathematical realities. If we try to match their scope and ancient wisdom, we'll just look foolish. Then what do you suggest we do? Lisa asked, worry clear in her voice. Tell them something they've never heard before. Tell them about people who had no business succeeding but did it anyway. Lisa stared at him. Jake, these beings have witnessed the formation of galaxies. They've transcended physical existence and mastered time itself. What could we possibly tell them that they haven't already experienced? The uncertainty of not knowing if you're going to make it, but trying anyway. Inside the amphitheater, the 47 alien species had gathered for humanity's presentation. Jake could feel their collective gaze as he walked to the center of the crystalline stage. The translation machines hummed as they prepared to convert his words into the hundreds of languages and communication methods used by the different species. Elder Vexthul stood to introduce the final presentation. Beings of wisdom and experience, we now hear from the youngest species in our gathering. Humanity has existed as a spacefaring civilization for merely 50 of their short years. Let us see what stories their brief existence has produced. Ripples of amused sounds passed through the audience. Jake heard the translations identify these sounds as laughter, curiosity, and polite condescension. Several species made comments that their translation devices rendered as expectations of simple entertainment. Jake stepped forward and began speaking in a clear, steady voice. I want to tell you about Amy Chen. She was 23 years old and had never traveled more than 50 miles from her hometown of Detroit, Michigan. She worked in a factory building aircraft engines during Earth's Second World War. Every day, she woke up at 5 in the morning, worked 10 hours assembling metal parts, then went home to take care of her sick mother. The alien audience shifted restlessly. This was not the kind of grand opening they expected. Where were the demonstrations of technological prowess? The tales of cosmic achievement? Several species made questioning sounds that translated as confusion about why this mundane story was being told. Jake continued without changing his calm tone. Amy had a younger brother named Peter. He was 19 and had joined the military to fight in a war happening on the other side of Earth. One day, Amy received news that Peter had been captured during something called the Bataan Death March in the Philippines. He was being held in a prisoner of war camp under terrible conditions. The crystalline beings made musical sounds that translated as impatience. Entity Null Song from the Void Touched created shadow patterns that indicated boredom. Even the patient depths dwellers seemed confused about why this simple tale was being shared with such an advanced gathering. Amy had no military training, Jake went on. She had no special abilities. She had never been in a fight. She had no advanced technology or superior evolution. Logic said she should accept that her brother was gone and continue her normal life. Ambassador Cronarch from the Timekeepers spoke up. Human Morrison, surely this narrative leads to a demonstration of your species' technological capabilities or strategic wisdom? Jake shook his head. No, Ambassador. Amy quit her job, enlisted in the Women's Army Corps, and fought to be assigned to the Pacific Theater. She wanted to get close enough to the prison camps to find her brother. The audience grew quieter. This was not following the pattern of any story they had heard during the previous 3 days. There was no mention of ancient wisdom, perfect planning, or superior abilities that would guarantee success. Amy learned to use weapons she had never seen before. She studied languages she had never heard. She trained her body to do things she had never imagined possible. She volunteered for dangerous missions that experienced soldiers avoided. She did all of this despite having no logical reason to believe she would succeed. Node Prime from the Machine Intelligence Network processed this information and found it inefficient. Human Morrison, this individual's actions appeared to violate basic cost-benefit analysis. The probability of success was statistically negligible. Exactly, Jake replied. That's what makes it worth telling. A murmur passed through the alien assembly. The translation machines worked overtime as different species discussed this strange concept among themselves. Jake continued Amy's story. He described how she slowly worked her way across the Pacific Ocean, participating in battles and operations that brought her closer to where her brother was being held. He told of the night raids she joined, the languages she learned from other soldiers, and the skills she developed through pure determination. Amy didn't succeed because she was the most evolved being in the universe. She didn't win because she had perfect technology or ancient wisdom. She succeeded because she refused to accept that some things are impossible. The story reached its climax as Jake described Amy's participation in the liberation of prisoner of war camps near the end of the war. He told of her searching through crowds of freed prisoners, not knowing if her brother was still alive. He described the moment she found Peter, sick and injured but breathing among hundreds of other rescued soldiers. Amy brought her brother home to Detroit. They both lived normal, unremarkable lives after the war. Peter became a teacher. Amy worked in a hospital. Neither of them ever traveled to space or discovered cosmic truths or transcended physical existence. Jake paused and looked around the amphitheater. The alien audience was completely silent. But Amy's story matters because she chose to act when success was not guaranteed. She decided to try when logic said she should quit. She believed her brother's life was worth fighting for even when the odds were against her. Elder Vexthul spoke in his deep, ancient voice. "Surely, human Morrison, you have greater tales than this. Stories of your technological achievements, your conquest of interstellar travel, your species' advancement beyond your primitive origins? Those are just tools," Jake replied. "The tools aren't the story. The story is what people choose to do when all the tools fail, when all the odds are against them, when wisdom says they should surrender." Lisa stepped forward to support her captain. "Let me tell you about Dr. Paul Martinez. He spent 30 years developing vaccines in rural Guatemala, using equipment that most species here would consider primitive. He could have worked in advanced laboratories with better resources, but he chose to help people that others had written off as hopeless cases." She continued with more stories. Lisa Park, a teacher who spent her entire career in poor mountain communities, believing that education could change lives even when statistics said otherwise. Captain William Hayes, a firefighter who ran into burning buildings when every instinct told him to run away. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a researcher who worked for decades on diseases that might never be cured. Each story followed the same pattern. Ordinary humans facing situations where logic said they should quit, but choosing to keep trying anyway. People with no special powers or ancient wisdom, just a stubborn belief that things could be better. The alien audience grew more and more puzzled as the human presentation continued. These stories had no cosmic scope, no demonstrations of superior evolution, no perfect outcomes guaranteed by advanced technology. Sage Omnitus from the Eternal Philosophers finally spoke. "Human beings, these narratives lack the scope and wisdom appropriate for such a gathering. Where are your tales of universal truths and cosmic consciousness?" Jake smiled. "We don't have those kinds of stories. We have stories about people who believed that one person could make a difference, even when the universe seemed too big and hostile for that to matter." "But why do your people choose to act against rational calculation?" asked Cluster 7 from the hive mind swarm. "Because we think individuals matter. Because we believe the universe can be better than it is. Because we're too stubborn to accept that some things are impossible." The third day brought the most respected storytelling species in the galaxy. Jake Morrison woke up feeling nervous about humanity's presentation scheduled for tomorrow. Today he would witness the masters of narrative art, the beings that other species looked up to as the ultimate examples of cultural sophistication. The Eternal Philosophers came first. These beings had spent millions of years doing nothing but thinking about the deepest questions in the universe. Their representative was called Sage Omnitus. It looked like a tall, thin figure made of swirling gray mist. When it moved, the mist shifted and changed shape like smoke in a gentle breeze. Its voice sounded like wind through deep caves, ancient and distant. "Greetings, temporary beings," Sage Omnitus said. "We bring you stories from the realm of pure thought. Our tales explore concepts that exist beyond the physical universe. We speak of truths that remain constant across all time and space." The philosopher began telling a story that Jake found almost impossible to understand. It was about abstract ideas that had no physical form. The tale described concepts like justice, beauty, and truth, as if they were living beings that could interact with each other. The story followed these ideas as they moved through different dimensions of reality that existed only in the realm of pure thought. The translation machines worked overtime trying to change the philosopher's words into something other species could grasp. Even with help from the computers, Jake only understood small pieces of the story. It seemed to be about how perfect mathematical relationships existed independent of any physical universe. The philosopher spoke of discovering eternal truths that had always existed and would continue to exist even if all matter and energy disappeared. The story went on for 4 hours. Jake's head began to hurt from trying to follow the complex ideas. When Sage Omnitus finally finished, the room fell silent. Even the ancient species seemed overwhelmed by the depth of philosophical thought they had just experienced. Next came the timekeepers. These beings existed partially outside normal time, which allowed them to see past and future events simultaneously. Their representative was called Ambassador Chronarch. It looked human-like, but its skin seemed to shift and change, sometimes appearing young and sometimes old. When it spoke, Jake could hear echoes of its voice coming from slightly different times, creating a strange layered effect. Fellow creatures bound by linear time, Ambassador Chronarch said in voices that seemed to come from yesterday and tomorrow at the same time. We share with you stories that span multiple timelines. Our tales show how events connect across different possibilities and alternate realities. The Timekeeper began a story that happened in several different timelines at once. It told of the same character making different choices and seeing how each decision led to completely different outcomes. The story jumped back and forth between past and future, showing how events that seemed unrelated were actually connected across vast spans of time. In one timeline, a war ended in victory. In another, the same war ended in defeat. In a third timeline, the war never happened at all. But the Timekeeper showed how all these possibilities were equally real and how they influenced each other in ways that beings trapped in linear time could never understand. Jake found this story even harder to follow than the philosopher's tale. The Timekeeper spoke of cause and effect working backward, where future events influenced past decisions. It described characters who knew how their stories would end before they began, but chose to live through them anyway because all possibilities had to be experienced. When Ambassador Chronarch finished, Jake felt dizzy from trying to keep track of multiple timelines and alternate realities. The story was impressive in its complexity, but he wondered if anyone in the audience truly understood what they had just heard. The final presentation of the day came from the Void Touched. These beings came from the empty spaces between galaxies, regions of space so remote and dark that most species considered them uninhabitable. Their speaker was called Entity Nullsong. It looked like a constantly shifting shadow with bright white eyes that seemed to contain no warmth or emotion. Creatures of light and warmth, Entity Nullsong said, in a voice like wind through an empty tomb. We bring you tales from the spaces between spaces. Our stories come from regions where reality itself becomes thin and uncertain. We have survived in places where the laws of physics break down, and where existence itself becomes questionable. The Void Touched began telling horror stories about the deep, empty regions between galaxies. It spoke of entities so alien that their mere existence challenged the sanity of anyone who encountered them. The stories described journeys through space so empty that travelers could go millions of years without seeing a single star. Entity Nullsong told of creatures that fed on the absence of things rather than their presence. It described worlds made of crystallized darkness and beings that existed in the spaces between thoughts. The horror stories were filled with concepts that hurt to think about, ideas that seemed to twist reality around them. Despite being scary, these stories followed the same pattern Jake had noticed in all the alien tales. The Void Touched survived their horrible encounters because they had evolved beyond normal physical existence. They conquered cosmic horrors because they had transcended ordinary limitations. Even their scariest stories had predictable outcomes where superior evolution guaranteed survival. As the third day ended, Jake felt overwhelmed by everything he had witnessed. The galaxy's most advanced species had shared stories of incredible scope and complexity. They had demonstrated knowledge and abilities that made humanity look like children playing in a sandbox. Lisa was unusually quiet as they walked back to their quarters. She had taken fewer notes today, and Jake could tell something was bothering her. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I keep thinking about all these amazing stories we've heard," she said slowly. "They span billions of years and cover concepts I can barely understand, but what? But they don't make me feel anything. They're impressive, but they're not moving. It's like watching a perfect machine work. You can admire how well it functions, but it doesn't touch your heart." Jake knew exactly what she meant. The alien stories were like beautiful mathematical equations. They were elegant and complex and demonstrated incredible intelligence, but they felt cold and distant, like admiring art in a museum rather than experiencing something that changed how you saw the world. "Tomorrow is our turn," Jake said. "I know, and honestly I'm terrified. How can we possibly compete with what we've seen? The human story we prepared about technological advancement in space exploration seems so small and simple compared to tales about the birth of the universe and the nature of reality itself." Jake had been thinking the same thing. Their planned presentation about humanity's rapid progress and achievements suddenly felt embarrassingly primitive. What could they say about the few decades since humans learned to travel faster than light, when other species had stories spanning geological ages? That night Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about all the incredible stories they had heard. The aliens had shared tales of perfect wisdom, flawless technology, cosmic consciousness, and transcendent evolution. Every story demonstrated why their species was superior to younger, less advanced races like humanity. But something was nagging at him. All these impressive stories shared something in common besides their vast scope and ancient origins. They all felt safe. The outcomes were predetermined by superior abilities, perfect planning, or transcendent wisdom. There was no real uncertainty, no moment where everything hung in the balance and could go either way. Jake got up and walked to the window of their quarters. Outside, he could see the crystal amphitheater where tomorrow's presentation would take place. In less than 24 hours, he would stand before the galaxy's greatest minds and try to represent humanity's storytelling tradition. He thought about the stories he had grown up hearing. Tales of ordinary people facing impossible odds, stories where the outcome was never certain until the very end. Narratives about individuals who chose to keep fighting even when logic said they should give up. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe being old and advanced was not the only thing that made a good story. Maybe there was something valuable in tales where the ending was not guaranteed by superior evolution or perfect technology. Jake made a decision that would either embarrass humanity in front of the entire galaxy or show them something they had forgotten in their millions of years of existence. He was going to throw away their prepared presentation and tell a completely different kind of story. The second day of the Great Story Exchange began with something that made Jake Morrison feel even smaller than before. The ethereal collective had arrived during the night. These beings were not made of solid matter like most other species. Instead, they were pure energy that took the shape of swirling colors in the air. They moved like northern lights dancing across a dark sky. Their speaker was a cloud of gold and silver light that sparkled like stars. "We greet you, young beings of flesh and metal," the energy creature said in a voice that sounded like music played on crystal bells. "We have existed since the first stars began to burn. We watched galaxies form from clouds of dust and gas. We saw the universe when it was young and hot and everything was connected in ways you cannot imagine." The ethereal being began to tell stories from the very beginning of time. It spoke of watching the Big Bang happen and seeing the first particles of matter come into existence. It had been there when the first stars formed, and when the first planets cooled down enough for life to begin. The energy creature told of drifting through space for billions of years, watching entire solar systems be born, grow old, and die. "We remember when your sun was just a cloud of dust," it continued. "We saw it collapse and catch fire. We watched your planet form from rocks and ice flying through space. We were there when the first life appeared in your oceans, though you were far too simple to notice us then." The story went on for 3 hours. The ethereal being described events that happened so long ago that most species had no words for such vast amounts of time. It spoke of cosmic forces that shaped whole galaxies and of energy patterns that connected stars across impossible distances. When it finished, even the ancient Zephyrians looked impressed. Next came the Machine Intelligence Network. Their representative was called Node Prime. It looked like a walking collection of metal parts and glowing screens. Wires and cables connected different sections of its body, and lights blinked constantly across its surface. When Node Prime spoke, its voice sounded perfectly clear and precise, like a computer reading data. "Greetings, biological entities," Node Prime said. "We will now share computational narratives that demonstrate optimal story construction. Our tales are calculated using 7 million variables to ensure maximum narrative efficiency and logical consistency." Node Prime began telling a story about a distant planet where a problem needed to be solved. The machine beings had run every possible solution through their computers and found the one perfect answer. The story described exactly how they had calculated the best way to save the planet from an asteroid collision. Every step was planned perfectly. Every detail was worked out ahead of time. Nothing was left to chance. The mechanical being told several more stories, each one showing how perfect planning and calculation could solve any problem. Its people never made mistakes because their computers could predict every possible outcome. They never felt doubt or fear because they always knew exactly what would happen next. Every story ended with complete success achieved through superior logic and technology. After Node Prime finished, the hive mind swarm shared their tales. Their speaker was called Cluster 7. It looked like a collection of different body parts from various creatures all connected together. Some parts looked like insects, others like fish, and still others like things Jake had never seen before. When Cluster 7 spoke, its voice changed constantly as different parts of its body took turns talking. "We speak as one mind with many bodies," it said. "Our stories celebrate the beauty of perfect unity. Every individual in our species thinks the same thoughts and wants the same things. We have no conflict because we have no disagreement. We achieve perfect cooperation because we are truly one being spread across billions of bodies." The hive mind told stories about worlds where every creature worked together like parts of a single machine. They were tales of massive projects that took thousands of years to complete, because every member of their species worked toward the same goal without ever arguing or changing their minds. They built cities that covered entire planets because millions of individuals all had exactly the same vision of what needed to be done. Lisa Bennett took careful notes as she listened to all these presentations. She noticed that each species was trying to show off what made them special. The energy beings bragged about their age and cosmic knowledge. The machines demonstrated their perfect logic and planning. The hive mind creatures celebrated their unity and cooperation. But something was bothering her about all these stories. She leaned over and whispered to Jake, "Do you notice anything strange about these tales?" Jake had been thinking the same thing. "They all seem to know how they're going to end before they start." "Exactly," Lisa whispered back. "The energy beings tell stories where their vast experience makes the outcome obvious. The machines share tales where perfect calculation eliminates all uncertainty. The hive mind talks about projects where everyone already agrees on what to do." As the day continued, more species shared their stories. The timekeepers told tales where they could see the future and past at the same time, so they always knew exactly what to do. The Void Touched shared horror stories about surviving an empty space between galaxies. But even their scary tales followed predictable patterns where their superior evolution helped them survive impossible conditions. Each presentation was impressive in its own way. The aliens had powers and abilities that humans could not imagine. They had lived through events that covered impossible amounts of time and space. But Jake started to notice what Lisa meant about the stories feeling strange. Every alien tale was like reading a book where someone had already told you the ending. The ancient species won because they were old and wise. The advanced species succeeded because their technology was perfect. The unified species achieved their goals because they all worked together without any disagreement. During the afternoon break, Jake overheard more conversations about what the human presentation might be like. A group of floating crystal beings made musical sounds that translated as mockery. "The flesh creatures will probably tell stories about their primitive wars," one crystal being chimed. "They fight each other with metal sticks and exploding chemicals." "I heard they live for less than 100 years, another added. "What wisdom could beings learn in such a short time?" A mechanical voice from the machine network joined the conversation. "Analysis indicates human stories will likely focus on emotional responses rather than logical solutions. Such narratives typically lack computational efficiency." Elder Vexthol approached Jake and Lisa again during the break. His ancient stone face showed what might have been amusement. "I trust you are learning much from our more experienced storytellers," he said in his deep voice. "Perhaps you are beginning to understand the true art of narrative construction." "We're learning a lot," Lisa replied carefully. "Every species has a unique perspective." "Indeed," the elder agreed. "Though some perspectives are naturally more valuable than others, age brings wisdom, as does experience. I confess I am curious to see what your young species will contribute to our gathering. We hope our stories will add something different to the mix," Jake said. Elder Vexthol made a sound that the translator identified as polite laughter. "Different, yes. I am sure they will be quite different from what we have heard today." As the second day ended, Jake felt the weight of expectations growing heavier. Tomorrow, humanity would be expected to share their greatest stories with these cosmic beings who had witnessed the birth of stars and the formation of galaxies. How could tales from Earth possibly measure up to such vast and ancient wisdom? Lisa was reading through her notes again when Jake returned to their quarters. She had filled dozens of pages with observations about each alien species and their stories. "I've been thinking more about what we talked about yesterday," she said. "These species have amazing abilities and incredible histories, but their stories all have the same problem." "What problem?" Jake asked. "There's no real choice in any of them. The outcomes are predetermined by superior wisdom, perfect technology, or absolute unity. Nothing unexpected can happen because these species have eliminated uncertainty from their lives." Jake sat down next to her. "So what does that mean for our presentation?" Lisa smiled. "Maybe it means we should tell them about something they've never encountered before. Something they've lost by becoming so advanced and perfect." "What's that?" "The possibility that things might not work out the way you planned, but you try anyway." The crystal halls of Kepler 442b had never seen anything like this gathering before. 47 different alien races sat in the great round room that floated above the moon's silver surface. Each group looked different from the others. Some were tall and thin like walking sticks. Others looked like floating clouds of light. A few resembled giant insects with too many eyes. The room buzzed with strange sounds as different species talked to each other through special machines that changed their words into sounds others could understand. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the human section with Dr. Lisa Bennett beside him. They were the only two humans in a room filled with beings who had traveled between stars for thousands or even millions of years. Jake felt small and young compared to the ancient creatures around them. Lisa kept taking notes on her tablet as she watched the other species. She had studied alien cultures for 10 years, but had never seen so many different kinds of life in one place. The meeting was called the Great Story Exchange. Every species in the galaxy was invited to share their best stories and tales. The idea came from the Zephyrians who had lived for over 10 million years. They thought of themselves as the best storytellers in the galaxy. Their leader, Elder Vexthal, stood at the center of the room. He was 15 feet tall with skin that looked like smooth gray stone and eyes that glowed blue like distant stars. "Welcome, friends from across the galaxy," Elder Vexthal said in a voice that sounded like wind through mountain caves. "Today we begin the first universal story exchange. Each of your species will share tales that show your culture and wisdom. We will learn from each other and grow together." Jake looked around the room and felt nervous. Earth had only learned how to travel faster than light 50 years ago. Most of the beings here had been crossing space since before humans learned to make fire. What stories could humans tell that would interest these ancient and powerful races? The first to speak were the crystalline hegemony. They were living rocks that could think and move. Their speaker was a being made of purple crystal that stood 12 feet tall. When it began to tell its story, it did not use words. Instead, it made musical sounds that rang through the air like bells. The translation machines worked hard to change these sounds into words that other species could understand. The crystal being told a story about mountains being born. It spoke of watching continents move and oceans disappear over millions of years. It had seen ice ages come and go like seasons. Its people remembered when their home planet was just melted rock flying through space. They had watched it cool and grow solid over millions of years. They saw the first simple life appear in warm pools of water, and watched it slowly change and grow more complex over vast amounts of time. The story went on for 2 hours. Every moment covered thousands of years. The crystal being spoke of patience that humans could not imagine. It told of waiting for perfect moments that came only once every million years. When it finished, the room was completely quiet. Even the oldest species seemed impressed by the vast scope of time. In the crystal being's tale, next came the depths dwellers from the ocean world of Aquatica Prime. They looked like giant squid but with smooth blue skin that glowed softly. Their speaker floated in a tank of special water that let it breathe while it talked. The depths dweller told stories of the deepest parts of their ocean world where no light ever reached. It spoke of cities built in underwater valleys so deep that the water pressure would crush most other life forms instantly. Their stories were about patience and watching and waiting. The depths dwellers could live for thousands of years. They built their cities very slowly over centuries. Every decision was made after thinking about it for decades. They told of wise councils that would discuss a single question for 50 years before deciding what to do. Their tales celebrated the deep knowledge that came from taking time to think about everything very carefully. As Jake listened to these stories, he noticed something. Each species seemed to be trying to show how much better they were than the others. The crystal beings bragged about living for millions of years. The ocean creatures talked about their deep wisdom. Every story seemed designed to prove that their way of thinking was the best way. During the break between speakers, Jake heard some of the other species talking about humans. A group of tall, thin beings that looked like walking trees whispered to each other in voices like rustling leaves. Their translation came through as, "The young mammals will probably tell simple stories about their tiny wars and short lives." A floating blob of green light pulsed as it spoke to its companion. "I heard their whole species is only a few 100,000 years old. What could they possibly have learned in such a short time?" Elder Vexthal moved through the crowd, greeting different species and asking about their planned presentations. When he reached Jake and Lisa, his glowing eyes looked down at them with what seemed like amused curiosity. "Ah, the humans," he said in his deep voice. "We are all very interested to hear what stories your young species will share. I hope you can at least provide some entertainment value for our gathering." Several nearby aliens made sounds that the translation machines identified as laughter. Jake felt his face turn red with embarrassment and anger. Lisa put her hand on his arm to keep him calm. "We look forward to sharing our stories with everyone," Lisa said politely. "Every species has something valuable to contribute." Elder Vexthal nodded, but Jake could tell he did not really believe what Lisa said. Of course. I am sure your tales will be quite amusing in their own simple way." As the first day ended, Jake walked back to their small quarters feeling frustrated. Every species they had met seemed to think humans were too young and stupid to have any good stories. The aliens had told tales spanning millions of years and crossing whole galaxies. How could stories from Earth possibly compete with that? Lisa sat on her bed reading her notes. "Jake, I've been thinking about something. All these stories we heard today were impressive, but they felt strange to me." "Strange how?" Jake asked. "They were all about inevitability. The crystal beings told stories where everything happened because millions of years passed. The ocean people told tales where wise councils made perfect decisions because they thought for decades. None of the stories had real surprises or moments where someone had to make a hard choice quickly. Jake had not thought about it that way, but Lisa was right. All the alien stories seemed to follow predictable patterns. The ancient species won because they were old and wise. The advanced species succeeded because their technology was perfect. There was no real drama or uncertainty in any of the tales. "What do you think that means?" he asked. Lisa smiled. "Maybe being old and advanced is not the only thing that makes a good story.